Good morning, everybody. How's the latency in the back? Can you hear me well? No fiber to the back yet, I understand. Good morning, good to see you here. Welcome to Luxembourg, actually. Haven't been here for quite a while. I used to be, indeed, the founder of RTL Television in 1989. So I've been visiting this country a lot. Let's see if this works. Yeah. I'd like to tell you something about the state of tech as we see it at Startupbootcamp. Startupbootcamp is an accelerator for startups. We see approximately 15,000 startups every year, and we choose 150 of them, so 1%, and we help them to grow in 6 months as they would otherwise do within 2 years. So we see lots and lots of innovation passing by. And we also have a second company, it's called InnoLeaps, and we basically help huge corporates to grow like startups. So we use the same methods that we do at Startupbootcamp, and we implement them for large corporations. So as a result, we build global innovation systems for startups and for corporates. And we are actually pretty able to forecast the tech developments, the tech world in the next 12 to 16 months. And I'm very happy today that I can tell you something about what we are foreseeing for the foreseeable future, and which will greatly help, I think, the fiber industry. Let me first start that it's our opinion that we are still at the very beginning of a new revolution. We call it the entrepreneurial revolution. And this revolution is happening very, very fast, almost as fast as fiber can allow. 3 times as fast, at least, as the industrial revolution. We call it the entrepreneurial revolution because it will result in end-ups instead of startups if large corporations and governments are not accelerating themselves like startups are currently doing. The tech industry is basically accelerating our whole society. These are Oliver and Wilbur Wright. You may have heard of them. I assume many of you came yesterday and maybe even today and arrived at Luxembourg Airport, and you wouldn't have arrived there if these 2 men wouldn't have invented the plane. And obviously, they started in a garage because Mark Zuckerberg started in a garage, Steve Jobs started in a garage. They were not the first ones to start in a garage. The Wright brothers started in their garage and they built this plane. And of course, they weren't taken seriously by the big steamliners that were sailing the ocean in those days in the late 19th century. Because why would they take the Wright brothers seriously? They couldn't transport any passengers in their first plane. They couldn't transport any cargo. And the plane could only fly for 60 or 70 meters. So why would you take them seriously? But we all know what happened a few years later. Big passenger planes were flying over those old steamliners and basically were completely changing and disrupting the old-fashioned steamliner industry. But you know, innovation never stops. It's a continuing process because KLM and other major airlines that basically were responsible for the disruption of those steamliners actually were disrupted themselves by companies like EasyJet, which created whole new business models for the airline industry. Innovation never stops. This is Neil Armstrong. I had the big pleasure of meeting him for a full day a number of years ago. And of course, Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon. And I was attending the Wimbledon finals and was sitting next to him. And I said, Mr. Armstrong, are you willing to talk about it? And he said, well, we're here to watch the tennis, but why don't you think of one question that you asked me about my first steps on the moon? And I said, Mr. Armstrong, if you are sitting in your garden late night and you're watching a starry night and you look up at the moon, what do you think? How do you feel? And he said, well, first that I was very privileged to be the first man to walk on the moon, but also that, can I have the next slide, please? Also that planet Earth looks much better from the moon than the moon looks from planet Earth. Now, why am I telling this story at this Fiber to the Home Congress? Because innovation works much better if you have a clear target. And if John F. Kennedy in May 1962 wouldn't have said, we are going to bring a man to the moon, and we're going to bring him safely back, it probably would have taken more decades than the original 8 years that it actually lasted before Neil Armstrong walked the moon. Innovation needs targets, and one of your targets is to spread fiber to the home throughout the world. And if you really want to set a date for that, I'm convinced that it will be actually much easier to do that. And of course, we all know what the result of those famous words in 1962 by John F. Kennedy were.
I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I'm a big space enthusiast, and these words always give me a thrill. How many times I've seen them, and I can still remember where I was when those first steps on the moon were taken. So we're here to talk about fiber, and of course there's a tremendous need for speed. By the way, the computer that Neil Armstrong used to land on the moon was much weaker than the smartphone that we currently have in our pockets today. But speed is of course crucial, and as a result fiber is crucial for the further development of the internet. And we feel that basically the internet is still in its infant stage. This is only the beginning. It's like an iceberg where only the tip of the iceberg is currently above the water. And you know, fiber of course is not something that was developed yesterday. It's been there for quite a while. Your industry has been there for quite a while, and still you are the future. It's about time that together we're going to accelerate that future. And I strongly believe that all optical multi-terabit networks are the future and what we need to further grow our economy. Let me tell you about where that economy and where the tech world is heading in the next few years. In the next 5 years, it will grow from 500 billion to 2.2 trillion. So there's a lot of development and growth about to happen. And fiber, once again, will be crucial to that. And something about the population. There are currently 7.2 billion people, but there will be more and more of us. So that creates new opportunities as well. But be aware that there is a new generation coming up. Actually, millennials are steering developments in a very, very great sense. By 2020, about half of the global workforce will comprise of millennials. They are literally ruling the world very, very soon. And they have different, a different mentality. They are used to different things. They are much more into access than into ownership of things. Yeah? They prove it with services like Spotify, for instance. They are very tech savvy, and there's a big emphasis on general wellness. Health is important to them, food is important to them, and they are used to flexible workplaces. And very soon, much more people will be online. At this moment, just over 3 billion people are online, but it will be 6 billion people in 2025. And they all need access to data, and the data will come through your fiber. And of course, mobile, as the previous speakers mentioned as well, is a crucial element there as well. And I'm happy to say if there's one word which basically defines the state of the tech industry today, it is mobile, and it continues to grow rapidly. Smartphones will become much more available. There will be even better network coverage. And mobile is now literally extending beyond developed networks and countries. At this moment, if you look at smartphones, there are approximately 3.6 billion unique owners. And by 2020, that will be 4.6 billion unique owners of smartphones. But that's still only 60% of the global population. By 2020, 70% of the world will be covered by broadband, and 80% of the global population will be within 3G reach. No 5G, no 4G, 3G reach. Pretty old-fashioned, huh? And of course, over-the-top services like Skype, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, WeChat are becoming increasingly popular. And we think that they will be even more popular because of the growth of 4G networks. And as a result, we feel that the traditional telcos, the telecom players, will need partnerships with those over-the-top services to really drive their long-term revenues. Their current business model is about to change because there is an all-IP future solution which is vital to retain customer relevance. So 4G networks are becoming dominant rapidly in the developed world. Who here can imagine that we would still be carrying 3G phones, while only a couple of years ago 4G was really introduced and development was very, very fast. And of course we're now all waiting for 5G. There will be 5.9 billion smartphones in 2020 and the data traffic on those phones will have grown tenfold from 2014. And of course, video is the key driver. YouTube now generates about 50% of its global traffic by mobile. Netflix takes 50% of all primetime access capacity in the US in prime time. And the latest forecast from Cisco, actually from last week, says that by 2019, 80% of all traffic on the internet will be video. And of course, 5G is already being tested. It can be 1,000 times faster than 4G. And of course, it will be of crucial importance for autonomous driving, for VR and AR and high-res video. So South Korea has stated that by 2020, the whole country will be covered by 5G. KPN, TNO, Huawei and Ericsson are now testing in the remarkable place of Loppersum in the Netherlands, which is a very small village, by the way. And still, with all these developments, actual mobile internet penetration globally, and especially in the developed countries, is still pretty limited. But it is actually growing, and it brings, for instance, the fintech startups and the fintech industry to unbanked populations. And there are already 255 live services across 89 countries, resulting in things like these.
As I look into the horizon, I relax and smile away as the message comes my way. Rukama bonde na milima, popote ujumbe ufikapo, M-Pesa huduma yasifika. Wateja kweli ni baraka, kutoa pesa ni haraka. With M-Pesa you do more, more, more. I can pay for the lights, send it from abroad, it's alright. My school fees and salary, you can always top up your life. Whatever you need, M-Pesa brings you relief. Wherever you are fine. Let's cherish the joy it brings. Popote unaenda, M-Pesa ipo. Relax, uko na M-Pesa.
I met the founders of M-Pesa about 4 years ago at an IBM startup competition, which they easily won. And M-Pesa by that moment was a very small company, and nowadays it's really unthinkable that they wouldn't be there in Africa, and they're really allowing millions and millions of people to lend money to each other by mobile phones. Let's talk about the Internet of Everything, because we can see in the applications from thousands of startups that that's really, really hot. We look at it as a digital nervous system for interactions between people and machines. And it's actually creating lots of new applications and lots of new services and allowing those services to prosper. We think it's key to smart cities, and we think that the Internet of Things basically has only just reached the public. I mean, they're really only just beginning to become aware that actually things can communicate with each other. So we feel that the number of connected things is growing tremendously up until at least 2020, and probably far beyond that as well. Our friends from PwC, who by the way helped us to create all these slides, think there will be 8 billion things connected to the internet in 2020. Our friends from Cisco, a partner in Startup Bootcamp, by the way, they think it'll be 50 billion devices connected to the internet. And we're not talking about your smartphone, we're not talking about your tablet or your computer, we're talking about actual things like lights, like traffic lights, anything you can imagine will be connected to the internet. And 1 million of new IoT devices will be purchased every hour, every day in 2021. All connected to the internet, hopefully through lots and lots of fiber. And of course, machine-to-machine connections as a result are becoming huge because all those things are going to talk to each other. There were 243 million in 2014, 1 billion devices talking to each other in 2020. And many of them, by the way, will not be here in Western Europe, but in Asia Pacific. We see a tremendous growth in that part of the world. And by 2020, almost half of all those mobile machine-to-machine connections will take place in that part of the world, where most people are living, by the way, of course, as well. And growth is especially coming from verticals like automotive, healthcare, utilities, of course, and smart cities, which are very important. Let's address some of the growth factors for the rapid growth of the Internet of Things. First, low power network rollout, very important. Increased standardization, because there's still not kind of a Windows platform, but then for the Internet of Things. Improved regulation, of course, governments have to play their role there as well. And of course, a greater assurance of end-to-end security, because security in this respect is, of course, crucial. Let's talk about wearables for a moment. The Apple Watch, actually I'm wearing it myself as well. We see a huge growth there as well. 35% annual growth over the next 5 years. Only 33 million devices last year. 148 million devices by 2019. And still that's not as much as probably you would expect. And we think that's because people don't understand all the benefits of smartwatches and other wearables yet. And the screens are still small, the battery time is still limited. I have to charge this at least once every 24 hours. And probably even more important is that there is no killer app for wearables yet. But of course, lots of companies are working on it, and we still feel that even despite this lack of a killer app, that there will be an increased use, especially for fintech and also especially for enterprise purposes. So within the wearables, the smartwatch will be by far the most important device. 40% of all those smartwatches in a few years from now will be Apple Watches. And we think that the smartwatch will grow by 41% per year over the next 5 years. But in order for it to really become mainstream, it has to become a standalone device which you can actually use without carrying an iPhone in your suit. And wearables are also really driving IoT and health startups. We can see that very, very clearly. They're not yet dominant, however, in 2016. And if you look at companies controlling those wearables and also as a result controlling part of the Internet of Things, we think that Apple and Google will continue to dominate at least for the next 5 years. Which brings us to digital health, of course, an important element of those wearables. 4 of the 5 last quarters, we've seen more than $200 million investment in digital health financing from many, many large corporations, by the way, as well. And apps are really becoming a regular part of care. Now you go to your doctor and the doctor will write you a prescription, some medicines, but one day, and that day is very, very close, a doctor will say, well, why don't you start using this or that app and see for yourself what is happening with your sleep pattern, for instance. Healthy food, weight loss, exercise, education, and information are all becoming much more important to the health industry, and you can all control them and guide them by using the right apps. 33% of all US hospitals are already offering apps, but the lack of funding is still a main barrier for effective use. So the top 5 digital health categories for the next few years that we foresee are the following. Cost transparency, very important. big data analytics, wearables, as I just mentioned, but also real-time healthcare is very important. Those wearables will be in your clothing, actually. And it may very well be that one day your doctor will be able to see by the mere fact that you are wearing a certain suit or a certain piece of clothes, hey, you're not healthy anymore, there's something happening, please come and see me. So personal medicines and information are becoming very important. And of course, with all those data coming from your body, going to a central server somewhere, going to your doctor, cybersecurity is very, very important. It's by far the hottest and also the fastest growing tech sector that we currently see. And you know, already cyber attacks are costing $400 to $500 billion a year. The cyber insurance market, as a result, has grown from 1 billion to 2.5 billion in 2 years. That's a huge growth, but it's still very limited if you compare it to the cost of cyber attacks and what it may do, not just to individual people, but to companies and to brands as well. So we see a huge growth in cybersecurity, in the cybersecurity industry in the next 5 years. It's creating lots and lots of new opportunities. And if you have a cousin here or there who doesn't know what to do with his life and he just comes out of high school, well, advise him or her to go into the cybersecurity because he will not be unemployed for the next few decades. Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, actually said that 50% of all current jobs will disappear, but also, like the Prime Minister mentioned as well earlier this morning, new jobs will arise. And already in the US there are 200,000 vacancies in cybersecurity, and by 2019 it will be 1.5 million. And globally it will be millions and millions of jobs. And you see that the security services market, as a result, is of course growing at a tremendous pace as well, from 8 billion today to 30 billion by 2020. So if you don't like the fiber to the home industry anymore, there are lots and lots of other opportunities as well. But if I were you, I would stay in fiber. Because fiber is crucial to fintech, and you see a lot of growth in the fintech, the financial tech industry at this moment as well. Fintech continues to grow enormously in the next few years, and the UK actually, not Luxembourg, although Luxembourg is important to the financial industry of course as well, but the UK is really set to become the global center. And we see lots and lots of startups still working with the Bitcoin, but other cryptocurrencies companies are here to stay as well. The blockchain, of course, is way more important than the Bitcoin in itself. Here's an example.
The world makes 500 billion electronic payments every year that take 36 trillion hours to process and cost people tens of billions in fees. Money uses old, inefficient technologies that are slow and expensive networks. The internet has made the world a flatter, more connected place, but payments have not kept up. It's time for money to evolve. Introducing Ripple, a new global payment network that does for what the internet did for information. With Ripple, it's as easy as email. You can send currency of any kind to anyone in seconds for next to nothing. It creates businesses, helps existing businesses grow, supports powerful applications, gives people control of their money, and makes the global economy accessible to billions of people without access to banks and financial institutions. The future of money is going to be a smarter, faster, more efficient and prosperous place for everyone. Come join the growing Ripple community and help build the network that will transform the way the world does business.
Yes, money flowing with enormous speeds around the globe. Ripple is just an example, but traditional financial institutions are now really seriously interested in small startups, in those guys working in those small garages of this world, basically trying to disrupt them. And you see the big banks really doing lots and lots of R&D investments at the moment. Peer-to-peer tech is really disrupting those banks. They are not doing these banks are not interested because they are just nice. No, they have to be active in this field because they are really feeling this in their core business. So there's a big surge in peer-to-peer lending at the moment. Startups are growing tremendously fast. They are landing large deals also with traditional banks at the moment. And of course, alternative payment methods are growing at an incredible rate as well. If you're talking about the need of reducing latency, here's a prime example. And we see that crowdfunding is here to stay. It's still small, but it won't go away anymore. And also wealth management, also an area where time is of crucial importance, is moving into a new era. There's a big shift in mindset. There's much more attention and power to the small investor who is always running behind the professional players. But you now see that high net worth individuals are being able to get access to tools and apps that basically put them on a level playing field with those professional players. So as a result, wealth management startups are becoming prominent, and they give their clients the same opportunities as the large investors. And automated investment management will very soon be normal. There will not be anybody, no human being, interfering in the trading of shares, for instance, of public companies. I already mentioned a little earlier that we see lots and lots of developments in the Asia Pacific, also in the financial industry, and you can clearly see that at this moment Western banks are weakening. If your company is not active in the Asia and Pacific area at the moment, I would strongly urge you to move in that direction. We see that those Western banks is that they understand that digital is important, but they think it's somehow kind of a solution set, while the global economic balance is shifting from north-south to south-south. So the Western banks are really not just because of their current problems are in trouble, because they are not innovating fast enough, and they're really being caught up by their competitors in Asia Pacific. And the leadership is very much oriented toward products, but not really looking at process innovation. If you want to innovate, you have to allow people to make mistakes. I once founded a sports channel, and that sports TV channel was only broadcasting for 3 months, and then it went south for numerous reasons. And I had invested 20 million euros, of 20 million guilders, about 10 million euros myself, in that sports channel. And it was, I was working at Endemol at that moment, and it was really affecting our stock price. So my two co-founders of Endemol and myself, we decided to buy the shares from the company to really make certain that our stock price would not be affected anymore. And so we had to put up 10 million each. And when the station actually went down the drain and wasn't broadcasting anymore, I met my two co-founders. And one of them had been very negative for the whole project from actually day one. And when I met him, he said, "You look like a knockdown boxer." And I said, "That's true. We lost a lot of millions. We had to fire over 400 people." And he said, "Ruud, what you have to do, take a 3-week vacation. The first week, think about how all this could happen. The second week, you really try to relax. And the third week, you're going to think about how we are going to earn this money back, because I want every single cent back." And so I took that break and I came back, and I came up with 3 ideas. And one of those ideas was basically needing an investment of 200 million. And within 5 minutes, those two co-founders of me said, "Ruud, let's do it. Let's invest another 200 million and do it again." And I said, "Guys, we just lost 200 million, out of which 10 million from each individual of the 3 of us. How can we do that?" And they said, "You know, you made a big mistake, and as a result you lost, and we all lost a lot of money, but we are very certain you're not going to make that mistake again. So just go out and make certain that this next project works and that we all get our money back." And actually, that's what we did. And within 18 months, we earned all the money back. But if you want to innovate, you have to trust people. You have to be able to let them make their mistakes. You know, if people can't fail, you cannot try new things. If you don't try new things, you can't innovate. You need to trust people. And basically, it requires a whole new mindset within major corporations, and especially big banks, because they are, of course, very focused on avoiding risk and on compliance and things like that. So leaders within the financial industry actually need a vision. They have to develop a vision for the next 10 to 20 years. And there's an urgent need to host an intergenerational dialogue. If you really feel, hey, what's happening in the tech industry, I can't really connect to it anymore, I can't follow with it anymore, try and find a young mentor who can guide you. At GE, Jack Welch, once their legendary CEO, forced any of his colleagues above the age of 45 to find a mentor below the age of 25. And it really works. It's a key ingredient of what we do at Startup Bootcamp as well. So just a few words about fintech in this year, in 2016. We see an increased use of alternative payment solutions, lots and lots of them. The embedding of payments in apps like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Pinterest, especially in social media, so you can instantly buy something that you see. And here's another example. This is a fascinating company, Cabbage. Actually, what they do, if you ask for a loan at the bank, if you're an entrepreneur, usually in the Netherlands, it takes 6 to 8 weeks before you hear usually no. And every now and then they say yes. The Cabbage platform basically takes your input, and within 7 minutes, they tell you if you will get a loan, yes or no. And they are aiming to bring that back to within 1 minute. So you apply for a loan within 1 minute here, yes or no. And in that 1 minute, they have checked your credentials in 180 points. So that's really fascinating, and I'm sure that if we could add fiber to the home throughout the world, that 1 minute can be reduced probably even further. ING Bank, by the way, invested recently in Cabbage, and they are going to roll out Cabbage in Europe as well. This is an American startup, which is of course crucial for the sharing economy as well. That's rapidly growing, and here's probably the best example of the sharing economy, Uber, which raised 8 billion since 2009. It's the world's most valuable private startup, 62 billion of market cap at this moment. It's currently operating in 306 cities in 63 countries. Unfortunately, not yet in Luxembourg, I noticed yesterday. And it spends about 35 million per week, and it's of course a huge hit. Everybody thinks it's a big success, but last year, let's not forget it, they lost about $2 billion. But it's really investing heavily in a new ride-sharing service, disrupting traditional taxis and cabs even further, called Uber Pool. I was in New York last week. I used Uber Pool there, and it works magnificently well. But 30% of Uber's trips, which we all know as a US San Francisco-based company, is already taking place in China. And you would think that as a result, Uber is by far the largest cab service in China. Actually, it's not. Didi Kuadi, I hope I pronounce it properly, is by far the most popular ride-hailing cab app in China. The sharing economy provides extra income, reciprocity, social interaction to lots and lots of people. It's easy to join. Everybody can use their car to provide rides or use their apartment to provide them to the Airbnbs of this world. And it's interesting to notice, I already mentioned the millennials a little earlier, 70% of the sharing workers in this hugely growing economy are 18 to 34 years of age. And 40% of those people driving Uber cabs actually have a college degree. So the IoT, which we just mentioned, the Internet of Things, is changing from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Shared Things. And millennials, I already mentioned them to you earlier, they are paving the way and they are sharing way more than others, and they demand and reach as a result lower prices, and there's a higher demand of work. We were talking about new jobs that are being created. Here's a prime example. Which brings me to the smart city and living, which is a crucial element of the Internet of Things. Cities are, of course, getting smarter and smarter, driven by IoT, driven by big data, and driven, no doubt, by fiber as well. And it provides for safer living environments, less pollution, less traffic congestion, and real-time service networks. And of course, an important element in that city of the future and in the sharing economy is autonomous driving. Here's an example.
Today, we have something extra special for you guys, and you guys will be some of the first people outside of our team and outside of Google to ever ride in it.
Oh, there it is. Oh, isn't that cute?
Go ahead and buckle up.
Okay, Annie, here we go. Yeah. All right, Connie, let's go. There's no steering wheel in the way.
It was a big decision for us to go and start building our purpose-built vehicles for this. And really, they're prototype vehicles. They were a chance for us to explore what does it really mean to have a self-driving vehicle. But in the small amount of time we've been working on it, we have functional prototypes, and that's exciting.
It's really cool. It was like really kind of a space age experience.
Oh, okay. Hooray. We're like queens.
Yeah, Annie and Judy will be probably driving those cars on a day-to-day basis very, very soon, because we really see that lots and lots of large corporations are now moving into autonomous driving. But obviously, where millions of people are going to drive autonomous cars that all have to be connected to the internet with no latency, fiber, once again, is an essential element to create that. And 90% of car accidents are caused by human error. So if you probably feel a little bit uncomfortable when you first step into such a car, bear that in mind. So increased safety, road capacity, fuel efficiency, and reduced pollution. I really think that autonomous driving is really important for our future. It's by far the fastest growing field in automotive. It requires the most complex coding that car makers actually ever faced. And of course, correct software integration is paramount for safety. But things look right, and actually on the 18th of March, 50 autonomous driven cars are going to go on the highways of the Netherlands, my home country, very, very soon. I don't own a car, but I'm very curious to see what will happen there that day. Of course, there are some risks as well, and that's once again why fiber is so important. System failures. You don't want to die because the computer crashed. Cyber terrorism. Users taking additional risk when they feel safer, actually. And even increased traveling resulting from faster or cheaper cars. So current congestion may be solved by autonomous driving, but then once the roads are pretty empty again, we may also use them much more again. So that's a risk. So by 2025, 15 to 20% will be of all cars will be highly autonomous driving. Tesla is already way ahead in there, but truly autonomous driving is likely to still be below 5%. But I was in Mountain View in California a few months ago, and I saw the Google cars driving, and actually they look pretty normal. A bit small, that I must emphasize. So in 2013, there will be implementation for taxis and car sharing. In 2040, we feel that some of the highway lanes may be really dedicated to autonomous cars only. And by 2050, basically, we'll have to change our highways, our roadways, and their design and management practices, because then it'll be very normal to see the majority of cars being autonomously driven. And maybe by 2060, it will be forbidden to drive your own car. That's sad news, huh, for the people at BMW and Mercedes. Well, you are aware, key tech players are involved: Google, Apple, Uber, Tesla, and incumbents like Ford and General Motors are struggling to catch up. But I'm pretty convinced they will be able to do that, and they may be able to team up as well with players like Google, etc. And you know, the technology is all there. I mean, those autonomous cars are driving, and the fiber is available, although we can expand on that. But legislation is still a bigger hurdle than technology, so there's a real challenge for the governments of this world. This is a nice one as well. Yeah, this is nice, isn't it? The delivery of a package by Amazon Prime Air, which is actually really testing these things. And I heard they are already delivering on a few of the islands in the north of Germany. Drones are growing at a tremendous pace. The drone invasion is literally underway. And mainly because consumers are more and more looking for instant gratification. They buy something today, they don't want it tomorrow, they want it today, and preferably even in the next half hour. And that's Amazon's prime target at this moment, to deliver anything you order within half an hour. We're months away of those services being really implemented by Amazon. Drones, in some circumstances, are 10 times cheaper and faster than any alternative. And it may sound strange, but they are ideal for less developed countries. The biggest enemy of drones, of course, is the weather. You don't want to have lots of drones flying above a city when it's really stormy weather. And of course, once again, just like with the autonomous car, regulatory framework, especially in the US, but also in Europe, still appears to have stalled. In the Netherlands, by the way, we are pretty advanced on that. But Amazon and Google are pushing hard. So the question is not, will drones in the end actually deliver to your home? The question is, when will it really happen? And it'll be soon. By 2020, there will be a 140 billion drone market, 56% of it in the US, 12% in China, and there are some leftovers for Europe as well. And of course, you may have heard of Google's Project Win, which delivers items within 5 miles, not within half an hour. No, they deliver within 5 minutes. So there's a lot happening there. And of course, the web is really taking the cost of moving information to almost zero. And the drones will do precisely that for physical items. And once again, connections, ladies and gentlemen, are of crucial importance. Which brings me to e-commerce. I'm speeding up a little bit because I've got about 5 minutes left, and I see Nadia looking slightly worried. Just some trends about e-commerce. Last mile delivery, you already saw an example of that. Very important. Hyper-local city sensors, part of course, the Internet of Things and smart cities, and open data are very important there. Just 4 months ago, 3 months ago, we reached a very important moment in the history of the Internet. 51%, the majority of all Internet usage by that moment was mobile, and I don't think it will ever change, and it will continue to grow tremendously. Mobile is really at the heart of future e-commerce, and it also creates a whole new logistic challenges. There's a huge need for a new supply chain. Same-day delivery means that actually new air freight facilities will be needed, and fulfillment centers are built next to airports. If you own a piece of ground next to Luxembourg Airport, you're a lucky person. And it will change the landscape around them. So we will move from mega distribution facilities to much smaller fulfillment centers, and package pickup options covering the last mile will be all over the country. Social media, just a few words. Of course, all of you by now are using Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, but we see a development there as well. Messaging services like WhatsApp are really becoming more powerful than social media themselves. Everybody looked up pretty strange when they heard that Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion a few years ago, but I think it was well worth the money, because basically Facebook was protecting its own interest by that way. WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, very clear global leaders, and some other players are dominating locally, but messaging services are really becoming platforms where you can advertise, where you can order, are becoming e-commerce platforms themselves as well. Among social media, Snapchat is of course growing very, very fast. 200 million users now, mainly young people. It's the key driver for vertical video usage. I mean, we're used to watch 16:9 TV, but we see everybody vertically shooting their video for social media. And it's important to notice that only in 2010, less than 6 years ago, 5% of all viewing was vertical. Now it's already 29%, and it's continuing to grow. So full-screen vertical video ads on Snapchat have a 9 times higher completion rate than horizontal, but there's still no proven business model for Snapchat yet. So we'll see what will happen there, and we'll see what happens with Twitter in the next few months. And just a few words about media, because I think they are providing huge opportunities for fiber as well. Non-digital will still contribute, let's not forget that, well over 80% of all global consumer revenues in 2019. But new products expand the number of multitasking moments. So people are not just watching TV, they're also watching the newspaper on their tablet, or they're using their apps on their tablet or on the mobile phones. So consumers are really calling the shots. We earlier heard people talking about the huge needs for transparency. We are moving to a fully transparent society. And content experience really trumps the delivery platforms. If you are able to deliver your content in a proper way, that's much more important than the platform that you use. So streaming audio, Spotify, Apple Music, really growing very, very fast, while radio is still dominant. YouTube currently 53%, and Spotify are leading, but Apple and Apple Music are rapidly catching up. And by 2020, only 4 years from now, digital music services will generate about 10 billion in revenues, and 50% of that will be streaming. Lots and lots of need for bandwidth and little latency. So cable and TV are also ripe for disruption. TV has reached its tipping point. The situation is really comparable to print in 2005, 4% decrease in users year on year. Netflix and YouTube are grabbing traditional viewers. TV ad spending is decreasing. So if you want to do business, I'd go to Netflix if I were you and not to the regular traditional TV players, although they do their utmost to catch up. And we were talking about millennials. Video on demand is, of course, key to them as well. Really driven by millennials. A truly on-demand generation. 33% watches more video on demand than traditional TV. And 1 in 4 users watches VOD daily, and 5% of all users doesn't even have a standard TV service at all anymore. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, the entrepreneurial revolution has only just begun. The internet is still in its infant age. If you feel we're way behind, how can we enter all this? You know, it's still early days. There are lots and lots of opportunities still available. Just give it a try. And with all these things which I've shown to you in the last 45 minutes, fiber is crucial. Fiber is crucial to the future of the internet. It is our future. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I would like to leave you with my main ingredients in life. I wake up every morning and I think, you know, I have to dance again today like nobody is watching me. I have to laugh again like I've never been heard before. And I have to innovate today like my life depends on it. Thank you very much for your attention. See you soon.